All right, well, my editing skills are crap. But can the same thing be said about... Am I really recording? Let me double check here. Okay, I am. Can the same thing be said about... What's this called? The Osiris Child Science Fiction Volume 1. All right, stick around and find out. Boom. Ba, ba, da, ba, 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 Doom. Ba, ba, da, ba, 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 ba. I can't remember how that goes. That's from the Dark Crystal. That was my attempt at the Dark Crystal opening theme, but that'll become a little bit more relevant in just a minute. But for now, hi, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of The Osiris Child Science Fiction Volume 1. If you're puzzled by that title, I still am after watching this movie. There's on IMDb, there's like some speculation that it's part one of like an anthology. The story certainly ends in a way that would lead well into a sequel, but it could also be like that kind of thing where it's like it's unresolved, but you kind of know where things are gonna end up going, you know. So I could see this as being kind of its own self-contained thing, or continuing on into something else. What's weird is like Science Fiction Volume 1. What do you mean Science Fiction Volume? Is this Volume 1 in such and such studio's science fiction library? The Osiris Child Science Fiction Volume 1. I don't get that. That's a really, really weird title. Anyway, the synopsis for this one, is written by, I think, teasertrailer.com, and it's on the IMDb site, reads, set in a time of interplanetary colonization, Cy Lombrock, a former nurse who is now a drifter with a haunted past, forms an unlikely alliance with Kane Somerville, a lieutenant who works for off-world military contractor Exor. In a race against time, they set out to rescue Kane's young daughter, Indy, amid an impending global crisis precipitated by Exor, the evil private military. Alright, so this is broken into chapters that are presented in non-chronological order. Like at the start, it's like chapter 1, subtitle, blah, 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 you know. And then, you know, every once in a while the screen will go black again, and it's chapter 2, new subtitle, da, 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 da. So it kind of has an unusual structure and presentation. The story initially focuses on the father, Kane, looking for his daughter. Kane works for the private military organization that's overseeing this prison colony, which it wasn't clear to me if the whole planet is purposed for this prison colony or if it's a colony on a planet somewhere far away from Earth that just has a big prison colony on it, but that's not its sole purpose. Anyway, an experiment on the prisoners goes wrong. The military abandons everyone on the planet, who is now not safe because of how things have gone wrong, and Kane now must rebel against his authorities to go find and rescue his daughter on the planet. And that premise is established all in the first chapter, and there are like, I think, a total of 7 chapters over the course of this movie. Soon after this premise is established, that non-chronological chapter break format is introduced, and then we go back and forth between, I guess what you would say is kind of like the current present time storyline, and then jumping back every other chapter to the prisoner Cy and his backstory. And each time we jump back to him, if I remember correctly, it increasingly goes further into his past every time a chapter is focused on him. So the first chapter focused on him will show what happened to him during events, you know, parallel to like chapter 1. Chapter 2 is like what happened to Cy during chapter 1 as it focused on Kane. And then but then from there, it just goes further and further back as the story moves forward. It goes further and further back into his past and reveals more about his backstory. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, and over all of this, the consistent element, I would say, is the girl, the daughter, who acts as a narrator. She's not actually seen in you know, the entire movie, maybe just about like half of it or so, but she is recalling the events of the film and kind of introducing chapters sometimes as though she's speaking about these events from the not too distant future, like maybe just 3 months or a year after the events of this movie took place. She's looking back and narrating and talking to us as an audience about what happened. What's interesting though is some very significant things that she refers to in these narrations never happen in this movie. She mentions meeting the general of this private army, which never happens in this movie. She mentions at the very beginning, like in the opening narration that she presents, she says something, she's talking about her father, and she says, somewhere along the way, he lost his purpose, which is why I traveled to the ends of the universe to find him again. What? That never happened. Never happened. In this movie, did she travel to the ends of the universe to find her father? That makes no sense to me. I don't know if that's something that's going to happen in the next installment of this series. I don't even know, based on the events of the movie, if that is possible for that to take place in a future movie. So it's really kind of strange. The script felt like, to me, that it just lacked focus in general, and it tried to do too much with too many side characters instead of focusing in more on the protagonists, which I wish it would have done. The non-chronological, structure also might have deflated what could have been building tension for me. I'm not sure. There's an opening in the opening chapter. There's like I think it was the opening chapter. There's like this cool aerial dogfight with sci-fi ships, flying through and firing at each other and stuff. But, unlike, say, in another sci-fi movie where, like, the evil empire is kind of built up and talked about and developed as a threat, we get a sense of, like, oh, these guys are dangerous and stuff. I don't get a sense of, like, how skilled these other pilots are that are attacking him. If he's really in trouble, they just kind of, like, throw me into the action, and I don't know. I just wonder if it would have had more effect on me if there would have been a more gradual build, and if the story would have been presented more chronologically. I don't know, ultimately, if that's the cause or not. I really didn't feel anything for these characters until near the end of the movie. It felt to me, this was just my impression, it felt to me like a lot of actors kind of making actor choices, like I could see the actor making a choice, as opposed to feeling like they were really in the psychology of their character, really understanding. I think maybe they were doing some emotional access and saying, okay, I should access this emotion at this time, but it just seemed like what they were accessing, what they were bringing about, it just wasn't, I don't know, it just wasn't fully developed. It didn't feel like psychologically, real for some reason. It felt just a little superficial. Now, an exception, in my experience with this movie, was a brief but great performance from the little girl in this emotional scene that she has with her dad. And I was like, wow, man, I wish we could have had more like that throughout this whole movie. There's lots of sci-fi action, there's some alien horror, and there's also some intended drama. So it's kind of a unique blend, maybe not unique, but, it's a decent blend of those elements. But I didn't feel tension during the sci-fi action. I didn't feel fear during the alien horror moments, and I didn't really feel empathy in the intended drama scenes, and that was for nearly the whole movie. It wasn't until maybe the last 15, 20 minutes that I, started like, oh, I got on the edge of my seat, and that might have just been because I ate a bag of Skittles shortly before that. Even so, the movie was all over the place in terms of concepts, which I kind of appreciated, even though I wish it would have been a longer movie and they would have been able to flesh those out and stuff like that. I mean, how many movies have sci-fi aerial dogfights, human experimentation, orbiting military bases, psychotic prison colonists, a deranged and post-apocalyptic Bonnie and Clyde, and Muppet-style aliens that cause human mutation, and I'll get to those in just a second. Let's zero in on that now as I talk about stunts and visuals. This is another Australian movie. In fact, it features the same caves as Australian movie Alien Arrival, which I just reviewed last week. At one point, it's like during the last 20 minutes of the movie, I was like, these are the same. Is this an Australian movie? These are the same caves as the ones near the climax of last week's movie. When I went to IMDb afterward, it was indeed confirmed to be an Australian movie. So, but despite that jarring visual element, which I may not have even noticed if I hadn't watched these two movies so closely together, despite that, I really thought the production values were great. The sets felt largely convincing, relative to other sets that I might see in other movies or TV shows. The visual effects, I would say the visual effects and the sets in general were somewhere between like television, American television, and like Hollywood movies, so above television, below somewhat the standard of like, a big Hollywood movie. But, that's still pretty solid, and with some spectacular high-flying, sci-fi combat. So I thought, my hat goes off to them. I love finding smaller movies or foreign films and stuff that can pull off that kind of quality. That was really cool. They also used exclusively, I think, practical effects to represent the aliens in this movie. And while I will definitely take a fake-looking puppet over fake-looking CG any day of the week, these aliens could have worked better for me if they didn't have such human-looking eyes. Now, I think there's a reason for that. The reason for them to have these human-looking eyes and humanize them a bit becomes more clear and appropriate at the end of the movie. I think they could have gotten around that and made, they kind of humanized one of them near the end. And I think they could have made that a unique situation and given that alien unique, human-like eyes, and not. They could have had a rationale in the plot, I guess is what I'm saying. They could have figured out a way to kind of humanize that one and make the rest less human. Because for some reason, something about using like, the human white, orbs and black pupils and, colored irises, there was something about the movement that was very telling to me, the showing it as a puppet. Whereas if it would have been more alien-looking eyes, I wouldn't have expected the same human eye movement. I wouldn't have expected that. I could have more easily just kind of accepted that it's, they're aliens, they move differently or whatever, their eyes move differently. I could have just bought into it a little bit more. So that, and also the aliens felt a bit slow and lumbering and not capable of the fast kills they pull off. Now, a number of those kills involve them kind of like projecting something, shooting something, or lashing out, not necessarily like leaping and jumping and stuff like that, but I still got the impression that these things were supposed to be pretty fast and moving pretty fast and suddenly and stuff. And so that there was a disconnect between what the story was telling me they were capable of and what I was actually seeing when they showed them clearly in action. They reminded me a bit of like nasty mutated versions of the mystics from Dark Ritual. Just kind of slow and lumbering, But late in the film, as I said, there is good reason for at least one of them to be humanized a bit. So I get that design decision, but I still felt like it fell a little bit short for me. I also wish the makeup and costuming was more consistent. The character Psy had dirt smudged all over him while he was in the prison. Kind of everybody in the prison and on the planet, ends up kind of getting dirt all over them and stuff. But he still, even while he was in the prison with kind of dirt on his smudges all over him as his status quo, he still seemed to have like a stylist trimming his hair and beard on the weekends. This is kind of like the CW approach, I think, to makeup. Sometimes on a CW show, they'll show a character that is supposed to be like, beaten up or in rough shape, but there's something about them that still just looks a little too put together, It's like, well, we still want him to be attractive, or we still want her to be attractive or whatever, so there's just, so they don't kind of let them go full-on messy and ugly, I wish they would have done that a little bit more in this movie. That kind of inconsistency was found elsewhere in a few smaller instances as well, and then when adding that to the sometimes superficial feeling performances to me, those two elements kept me from buying into a lot of these characters. So, all right, so I always try to ask myself if there's anything of worthwhile moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this movie that might stimulate worthwhile thought or conversation. Well, in this one, honestly, it was hard to pick out any themes. There were what felt to me like theme tropes, but just like the story, they were, peppered and numerous and going in a bunch of different directions at once, and I never felt like any of them were developed. They were just kind of like, okay, there's a little bit of a redemption trope going on here, or there's a little bit of, like someone dealing with regrets, or someone wanting to kind of make up for their past, or whatever. So these little kinds of things are like a father-daughter, kind of thing going on. But none of them were developed. They were just kind of like all peppered all over the place, which is why I would kind of describe them maybe as like theme tropes all over the place, but none of which were felt developed enough to really say anything to me. So anyway, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I would go back in time and say, Peter, skip this one. Unless you're in the mood to watch a movie and just kind of ask the question, what were they thinking in how they wrote this, how they made this? What is the concept? Where are they going with this? You know, if you're in the mood to just kind of see something that's not like a bad movie, but it's just making some unusual, somewhat unexpected choices, and, you could kind of think to yourself, okay, well, that's kind of rough, or you could just think, well, this is just a little bit unusual. Maybe I shouldn't be too critical of it. You know, the best way I think probably, Peter, to see this movie is without watching the trailer and having no expectations for what the experience will be. You still likely won't enjoy it very much, but you might better appreciate the novelty of them going in so many different directions at once. All right, those are my thoughts. I forgot to add, this one is made in Australia, so it has no MPAA rating. I think it probably sits in like the PG-13 or R spectrum for violence and gore. I don't remember any really hardcore language, so I think violence and gore is probably going to be the issues going on in terms of content. All right, those are my thoughts. I would love to get yours in the comments below. Please consider supporting this channel by becoming a Spirit Blade Insider, which grants you exclusive monthly behind-the-scenes goodies and content. For more info, you can visit our About page over at spiritblade.com, where you'll also find our audio dramas and our weekly podcast. And if you want to like, share, and subscribe, that does help to grow our community here. Finally, there's a ton more content and community over at christiangeekcentral.com, so I hope you'll join us there soon as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. In the meantime, I'm going to look for this off button.